Hello, my name is Chesney and my project is titled In and Out of National Parks, the Role of Local Ecological Knowledge in the Long-Term Conservation of Biodiverse Anthropogenic Landscapes in West Africa. These are my supervisors and my institutions. There is an urgent need to understand how humans and others share landscapes. Rural communities, often dependent on subsistence agriculture, manage complex interactions with their coexistence with wildlife. Primates can be particularly challenging as they adapt to optimize feeding, including crop foraging that promotes close human interactions. Yet, for example, more than 80% of Western chimpanzees, like the one in this photo, live outside formally protected areas, suggesting an ontological human-wildlife coexistence where informal restrictions regarding their hunting, consumption, and habitat may play a critical role in their continued survival. Even so, conservation strategies often fail to acknowledge the role of knowledge, beliefs, and practices that people develop in relationship with their natural environment. Local ecological knowledge can be defined as observational knowledge, understandings, practices related with resources, and beliefs related to ourselves as part of ecosystems. Local ecological knowledge is generally transmitted across generations in relation to people's interconnections with each other and the natural environment. Once viewed, at least academically, as a static body of knowledge, research has shown changes, hybridizations, adaptations, and disappearances in local ecological knowledge over time in response to socio-ecological changes, which has shifted the view of local ecological knowledge to something more dynamic or fluid. Generally speaking, local ecological knowledge is specific to an area and a group of people and is integrated within the boundaries of cultural traditions holistically and is therefore, to the people with it, intuitive and informal and built within the history of the land and involvements with its inhabitants. Local ecological knowledge can contribute to the conservation of biodiversity and ecological processes. Research on the connection between local ecological knowledge and wildlife persistence remains limited to either large-scale overviews or case studies focused on taboo inside protected areas. Where research has been conducted, the importance of incorporating local ecological knowledge in conservation planning is evident. Usually bound to a specific time and place, local ecological knowledge can help explain human-wildlife coexistence and its challenges. A better understanding of local ecological knowledge can enable more effective and specific conservation efforts, benefiting both wildlife and people. It is likely that the long-term conservation of wildlife, especially of those sharing habitat and resources with humans, will only be successful where local people continue practices that promote biodiversity and where formal conservation management looks past disciplinary boundaries and into understanding the evolving nature of local ecological knowledge. Fieldwork will take place inside and in neighbouring communities of Cantanesh National Park in Guinea-Bissau and Atambaclimi National Park in Sierra Leone, and these areas are characterised by high sociocultural, ethnic and religious diversity and high levels of human-wildlife interactions. This project will prioritise local ecological knowledge related to Western chimpanzees for a variety of reasons, including that they are of high ecological, cultural and economic value, and that they are critically endangered and therefore a primary reason for conservation action and the establishment of multiple protected areas across their range, the whole dark grey area on the map on the left. International directives in formal conservation strategise for a concerted effort across the range of threatened wildlife, and a byproduct of this is a restricted recognition in the difference in realities of the people sharing these landscapes, which restrains the potential effectiveness and long-term sustainability of conservation strategies. Therefore, a multi-sited research approach is needed, which can allow us to understand why, when and where local ecological knowledge pertaining to the protection of wildlife are, for example, translated into resource management practices, such as the active avoidance of hunting or the maintenance of a wild resource. To do this, I will identify local ecological knowledge that directly or indirectly protect wildlife. I will seek to understand how local ecological knowledge and associated practices pertaining to wildlife change over time. I will record local ecological knowledge specifically related to Western chimpanzees of the ethnic groups indigenous to the areas that may explain the persistence of Western chimpanzees prior to and in the face of formal conservation intervention and the challenges it presents. I will reflect ethnographically on the role of local ecological knowledge in formal conservation in the shared landscapes. And finally, I will use the results of this research to develop a kind of framework for the inclusion of local ecological knowledge pertaining directly or indirectly to the protection of wildlife, with a focus on chimpanzees in formal conservation planning. I will adopt a mixed method approach in an effort to achieve these objectives. I will conduct an extensive review of historical records on conservation intervention and local ecological knowledge using databases, existing literature, conference proceedings, and archival material. This research will include interviews, some of which I already conducted in 2017 and 2018 on Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau conservation-related issues. I will conduct a transvaluation of chimpanzees and maybe also other important species. To do this, I will develop methods including questionnaires on local ecological knowledge themes related to wildlife. For example, location, protective or destructive, habitat or species, consume or trade. Part of the questionnaire will be a tailor-made chimpanzee cultural significance index. Cultural significance indices are a common tool in ethnobotany, but have only been used once for primates. And that's the paper on the bottom right. And they provide a framework for identifying patterns across socio-ecological systems, facilitating the tailored design of more qualitative methods relevant to the area and therefore useful in informing effective and specific conservation strategies. Then I will go to the field. So this will be in 2 stages, and then those 2 stages will be repeated. So the first stage is through informal conversations and photo elicitation exercises. I will collect preliminary data on local ecological knowledge pertaining to certain areas and specific species that will inform the finalisation of the questionnaire. Then a representative number of participants determined based on village size will take the questionnaire. The second stage, I will conduct a more in-depth investigation. So semi-structured interviews and participant observation will form the base of case studies. Oral history and timeline interviews will be used to look in more detail at the specific factors influencing local ecological knowledge over time. Then, I will analyse this data, evaluate whether improvements could be made, and repeat it the following year in the next country. In these shared landscapes, incorporating humans in biodiversity conservation strategy is so important, as is incorporating wildlife into anthropological investigation. I would like to develop some kind of framework for including local ecological knowledge as an independent variable in typical biodiversity strategy. And finally, after data analysis from both countries and the development of some kind of framework, I will return to Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone for short visits, maybe 1 or 2 months each. I will communicate the project results. In this time, I will try to confirm some of the results by discussing them with people involved previously in this research for some kind of collaborative ethnography. This project will increase the capacity to include informal conservation practices and formal conservation strategies by contributing to our understanding of local ecological knowledge and its potential impacts for wildlife conservation. Raise awareness and encourage conservation organisations to actively incorporate social justice and human development needs into their policies, leading to a more sustainable and equitable human-wildlife coexistence, both inside and outside of protected areas. Reinforce the long-term collaborations between the affiliated organisations, build local capacity for anthropological investigation through the identification of research gaps and the creation of a priority list of further inquiry, and contribute to the knowledge on critical anthropological topics in the Anthropocene, making the project applicable everywhere humans and wildlife share wild and/or cultivated resources. Research outputs will inform evidence-based coexistence strategies, aiming to improve wildlife conservation and local livelihoods through an improved understanding of local ecological knowledge in theory, barriers in practice, and the causes of change in local ecological knowledge over time. Mitigate and alleviate human-wildlife and human-human conflicts and conservation scenarios by identifying ways in formal conservation that promote equality between local people and conservation management organisations, which will also reduce the likelihood of conflict. This project will foster gender equality, promote resilience in socio-ecological systems, contribute to urgent protective action needed to reduce biodiversity loss through sustainable management of terrestrial ecosystems, and promote inclusive, peaceful and sustainable societies by informing conservation institutions of socially equitable management recommendations. Thank you for your time.